Hello, hello, hello. Today we're going to look at a very exciting game from round four of the candidates tournament that is taking place right now in Berlin with the white pieces, Vladimir Kramnik, and with the black pieces, GM Fabiano Caruana. Let's get into this fantastic game. Now, this is the round after the rest day, and in the previous round, round three, Kramnik played possibly his immortal game. He's played many of them, in my opinion, but uh, that game against Levon Aronian is going to be remembered for a long, long time. And since it's late in his chess career, it is going to stand out in many people's minds when recalling Kramnik's greatest games. It reminds me of Kasparov late in his career in 1999 when he defeated Veselin Topalov on the white side of Pirk's defense. So it's a game after that with the rest day in between. Kramnik has the white pieces. He's flying high. He's in the lead in the tournament. And, as people do, although I felt it was vastly premature, is that already crowning Kramnik as the challenger to Magnus Carlsen, and it's like hold your horses. There are a bunch of rounds left to go. So as you can see here, what we have is Petrov's defense by Caruana, and we have this sort of a sideline to Petrov's defense. Normally you'll have um, after D6, knight f3, uh, knight takes e4. You'll have moves like d4 or knight c3 is popular. Going into this stuff, um, a few years ago. So Kramnik chooses a line that is going to get him into the end game. I'm sure he's prepared this. Kramnik used to be one of the leading Petrov players from the black side before he adopted the Berlin defense in his match against Kasparov. He was playing the Petrov as black a lot. So I'm sure he has some, tricks up his sleeve in this line. So he pulls out this line, and you get a similar position with the knight takes c3 line, except the queens are off the board. So you get this position. And just real quick, as I was showing you, that one of the lines that were popular in recent years was this line. But notice the queens are still on the board. So Kramnik creates the same position without queens. All right, so nothing remarkable here. Very symmetrical position, but it is not easy for black just to draw. Although it looks, after the queens come off, it looks like these guys could just shake hands. It's really not that simple. And Kramnik has been contributing a lot over the last 10 to 20 years uh, to chess theory, in my opinion, in this area where without queens, he's been introducing these positions over the board, these middle game positions that are very rich in play. It's not just an automatic handshake just because the queens go off. And Kramnik has been very good at finding, um, these hidden crevices in these type of positions where in the past they might have been avoided because they look so drawerish. Like after all, Queen E2 and trading the queens off and the Petrov, black has no pawn weakness. If anything, it's white that has the structural weakness. Why go into this with the white pieces? And I think Kramnik has been great at using these type of positions and mastering them and showing that there is a lot of play even in these quiet looking positions. So Kramnik develops very normally, pieces in the center, uh, the classic chess players would be very proud of the way Kramnik has developed, and Black has nothing to worry about either. He develops in normal fashion, gets his bishop to f6, perhaps preparing rook to come to e1. You see this idea a lot. Many openings, for instance, Alakon's defense exchange variation, you will see bishop go to e7 and f6, clearing the way for the rook to come to e8. And soon Black will be finished with development. Soon as he finds a home for c8 bishop, and the rook will uh, come to the center, and then it's definitely looking drawish at this point. Knight d2. So now Kramnik begins to try to apply the screws on Black's position. Just a little positional pressure. So now this knight comes back here. The idea of coming to e4. The rook comes over, preventing that. And now the bishop comes to f3. Again, more control over e4. And this knight can come here. And of course, Black wouldn't want to lose the bishop here and have his pawn structure destroyed. Knight e5. So now Fabiano threatens to gain the bishop here itself, but Kramnik plays a very nice idea here, which I like. Bishop f4. And now it's very problematic because if knight takes here, you have this problem with this rook here. All right. Also, back rank issue. Also, with the bishop now on this diagonal, this pawn, would be unprotected if this bishop leaves on c8. So, what does Black do about these little subtleties? Well, he has to, perhaps create a little weakness in the position, and this is where This is what I'm talking about with the Kramnik creating these rich middle game positions where there's a lot of play. It seems like it would be an easy draw at first, but it's not. It's just a gradual grind and boa constrictor style play from the former world champion. So knight e5 is played, and now bishop f4, exploiting the fact that this knight can't really move now. And of course, this guy would love to come out, but you have this to deal with. So king f8, dealing with the problem of this rook. So now the rook is protected, and we can win the bishop here if we're Fabiano. This is why the bishop now moves. And now this is an important move also, because, and this is one of the ideas that Nimzovich expresses in the controversial book My System. And I say controversial because a lot of GMs don't really like it. A lot of masters. It's funny because for a book that's praised as much as My System, when you actually speak to international masters and GMs, it's like, it's okay, some it's dated or whatever. So My System is kind of like a polarizing book. Some people love it, and some people are like, whatever. I'm kind of like in the middle on it. There's some things in it that I believe that Nimzovich explains very well. And when he talks about the outposts, I think that's one of them. One of the things he says, now this is not really an official outpost for this bishop on d5. Now if the pawn was here, then you could say, yeah, it's an official outpost. But for all intents and purposes, the bishop on d5 is on an annoying square for Black. And when Nimzovich talks about one of the purposes of the outpost is for the cause opponent to weaken his position, because since the piece exerts such great influence on that square, the opponent is practically forced to try to get rid of the piece. Now, the natural move would be to perhaps play bishop e6 and just try to trade off this bishop right here. But again, you have this issue with this pawn being captured. All right. So the other alternative is like c6, but when c6 is played, guess what? d6 is now weakened, and of course you have rook b8. But do you really want the rook sitting on b8 guarding a pawn, especially where down the line a trade might happen, and then you'll have to take with your king because the rook will be bound to protecting this pawn. So Fabiano opts for c6. Bishop goes back here, and now you have this pawn that's backwards. And now it's difficult just to play the move d5. Of course, if black could play d5, his problems would just be solved immediately if he could just play a move like d5. But it's not so simple because at the d5, a move like c4 can be played. And you have this exchange of pieces. And, black, again, is not lost here or anything. But white just has that slight nagging positional advantage. He's gotten rid of that weak c pawn, and let's say for instance that the rook here takes, and of course he can't take with the king because this pawn, so he has to take with the bishop, and then white, can develop this, slight initiative, pushing black around. For example, and be first to get his king out. Of course, white is a long way from winning, but white just has that continual, pressure that he can place on a position. I mean, actually, I think white is just fine here, but excuse me, black is just fine. But I just want to show you an example of the type of pressure that white will exert in these type of positions. So, for instance, a6, protecting the pawn. You got these type of moves. And so black is constantly under pressure and must remain vigilant with very little chances of winning. That's what Kramnik likes. So the bishop b3, back to the game, c6, bishop b3. Caruana, skips the idea of playing, d5 or anything like that, for now, and gets his pieces out. He plays bishop f5. h3, and now Caruana has to seriously consider white's ability to play moves like g4 in this position. All right, so he plays g5 on his own. Kramnik plays bishop h2. Again, notice little positional defects in black's position. And this is the type of chess Kramnik likes to play. He has very deep positional understanding, a lot of experience, and these are the type of positions where he could just gradually grind down his opponent. Interesting to me is that Caruana has a similar style, but he's younger. Let's keep going. Bishop h2, king g7, and now c4. Notice the clamp against his pawn right here. Right, this positional moves. Yeah, this bishop is dead for the minute, but maintaining this weakness in the black position is worth it. g4. Now knight e4. So now the bishop pair is going to be extracted. Again, these are like small concessions, but they add up. Another thing that Nimzovich said in his book Blockade is that the master, right, must content himself with the accumulation of small advantages, and that's what you see. If you look at a lot of grandmaster games, you will see that it takes a while to win these games, and it's by the accumulation of small advantages. You get a weakness here, you get a weakness there, and you pile them all together, and then you win a pawn or something like that, or a piece, and then you go on and win the game. So here, grabbing the bishop here is a small advantage. Right, this pawn on d6 is attacked twice, so therefore the bishop pair must be relinquished by Caruana. But which bishop? He decides to part with the light square bishop instead of, say allowing this to be captured. But the pawn would have been captured instead, so he has to get rid of the light square bishop. Rook takes e4, bishop g5, check, king b1, g takes. And now play gets sharp as Kramnik tries to damage the black position even more. In this case, with the move c5, he wants to simply undermine the protection of this knight on e5. Another option, of course, is g takes h3, but then black has a little time where he can play a move like f5, for example, and say after rook e1 and knight f3, attacking these two, and you can see black having a chance to strike back here. Okay, the position is getting a little bit messy, right? So Kramnik goes for c5 to continue to build the pressure on the position. f5 anyway. And at this point, Kramnik goes on an attack. But here, he's kind of sort of compensation. The after f5, the position turns around here, and perhaps, in hindsight, this move was probably the best move for white here. Just keeping up the material balance here. But again, with the king, sort of exposed, the lead in development, better placed pieces, it seems natural to try to break down the black position in this way. So the rook swings over. You have this threat here, threat here, threat here. Seems like Kramnik has exactly what he wanted. The rook comes down to b7 check, attacking the king. But this pawn right here is very dangerous. King h8, and now c takes d6. Now, again, not to keep bringing up Nimzovich, but I can't help but to think of certain statements that he made, in these positions. When he talks about the passed pawn, he says the passed pawn is a criminal. It must be arrested and locked up. Okay? Must be blockaded. Passed pawns are very dangerous. Right here, it looks like, white should have no problem at all stopping the pawn from going to g1. All right? However, that's the type of thought that gets you caught up in, tactical mishaps. Right? When you see a pawn like that, you have to stop this pawn. You have to blockade it. Right? You can't even give it a chance to sacrifice itself. Like for example, if certain positions existed, the move, legally this pawn could be promoted. That's how you have to be strict when dealing with passed pawns. This position, however, is very difficult because, say, if Kramnik try to play a move like rook g1, then knight f3 would just kill him. So this pawn is a big problem right now. So Kramnik creates his own passer here. C takes d6. And now the knight coming to f3 is going to cost Kramnik a piece. So Kramnik decides on the best practical choice, which is to basically get as many pawns as he can for the piece, and he does a good job, as now he will have a 4-1 pawn majority on the queen side. Knight takes, bishop takes, rook a d8, rook e2, bishop takes g2, rook takes f2, and now Kramnik plays bishop c6, protecting this pawn here. And the position, according to the engines, of course, is winning for black. However, in practical terms, this is very scary to play against. So this position, again, very difficult to play over the board. And let me mention, at this time, Fabiano Caruana was in tremendous time pressure. He needed like 12 moves to make it to the time control, and he had like a minute on his clock. So he's basically living off the increment. All right, and the commentators definitely thought that he probably would lose on time, because in this position, Caruana is better. So he really and if he had enough time, he would probably just slowly be able to convert this. However, in the time pressure, he wasn't able to find exact moves. Of course, he's able to find moves that are just practical. But here, you need concrete calculation. He plays the move knight g4. Rook takes a7, and now this is very dangerous. Four passed pawns on the queen side. And it's ridiculous, right? However, Caruana still has his trumps also. He has an extra piece and he has two passers. Okay, and now remember that even with the passers, black having the extra pieces, black can always sacrifice, give back, a knight or whatever for two pawns or bishop or something like that. So to me, it's harder for harder for white to stop black's passers in the long run. Knight e3, and now rook g1. Now here again in tremendous time pressure, Caruana makes a mistake. Now the rook is attacking the bishop, so in time pressure you make a move like h6, just protect the piece, and you're one move closer to time control. However, and this had been pointed out by Peter Svidler and Jan Gustafsson. Of course, instead of h6, this is simply going to win. Rook takes c2 with the attack on this bishop. Okay, this just totally blows up white's spot, and Kramnik be lost. Of course, the main idea is if rook takes g5, rook takes c6 here. All right, and then black is that much closer to winning. Let's say rook g3 attacking the knight, then just simply f4, rook f3, d6, and maybe starts running with these guys. d5, king c2, and eventually black is going to pick these pawns up, and this guy is going to race down the board. Of course, that's difficult to calculate the ramifications and tremendous time pressure. So h6, just a natural move, but a move that kind of lets Kramnik off the hook here. What I like to tell students about time pressure, in time, time on the clock in general, is that I treat time as one of the elements. Like you might look at, the bishop pair, pawn structure, right? King safety, things like that, and determining, who has control of the center, etc., as elements in determining who has an advantage. I consider time as one of the elements too, because you have to think practically. You can have a winning position, but if you only have a minute on the clock to convert it, and your opponent has an hour, I mean, there's a high percentage that you're gonna make a bunch of blunders and either equalize, the position to be equal, or the position is going to deteriorate, and most likely it will deteriorate in your opponent's favor. So you have to respect time and treat it as one of the elements. I don't know how you would quantify it, but if you want to quantify it, you could say maybe, half an hour behind the clock is worth a pawn or something like that. You can make up your own criteria, but take time seriously. Don't allow your opponent, to be, 20, 30 minutes ahead on the clock. It's ridiculous because you're really it's to me it's equivalent to basically like giving up a pawn or something like that, because you will make that magnitude of error in a time scramble trying to, convert your advantage, and you'll be watching your advantage dissipate, and you'll be disappointed, and then after the game you'll say that old tired chess saying, oh, I had a winning position, or I was winning, but this and that. You have to train for the clock also. Let's keep it moving. So here Kramnik used the opportunity to play rook c7, and of course, he clears the avenue for the pawns to advance. Although he protects the bishop, from in this scenario, and black loses a chunk of his advantage after king g7. Fabiano still fighting in time pressure. He plays king g7 here again. natural move. And there it is, a4. Let's go. King f7, and now bishop b5 by Kramnik. Even here, a5 is still possible, but he plays bishop b5. This protects this pawn with the rook. Also, in certain lines, this bishop can return here and play this check against the king. Also, of course, not here because of the knight. King e7, again another natural move in time pressure, getting close to the pawn. a5, and now c3 is played. This prevents the rook from being able to get behind the bishop here. King d6, rook b7. I remember during the game, I was wondering why not just rook c6. King e7, a6. To me, that was definitely better. But I know Kramnik was under time pressure at this time too. But that was my first instinct. Okay, I wasn't really worried about this too much. Rook takes d7, rook c8. Right, this guy is hit. Rook a7, rook e8, and we're gonna pick this guy up right here. King f6 here, rook g4, and then just simply rook e1. And I like that position for white. However, Kramnik played the rook over to b7, and this gives the king a little more scope to be able to get over if he needs to. Rook g4 and rook e1. Of course, it's bad news to play this move right here. Just connecting the pawns. So Kramnik plays rook e1 and f4 by Caruana. At this time, after rook e1, both players have reached the time control. Even instead of this move, that's throwing this move, rook b6 check. Again, driving the king away, king e7. And now, move like rook e1 or something like that. f4, a6, and again, it's a very dangerous position. Now that both players have found the made the time control, excuse me, and have time to think. Now it looks very dangerous for white, and excuse me, yes, for white, because like I said earlier, it's easier for black to hinder or slow down white's passed pawns. Whereby, if you look at black's passed pawns, they're like in the clear. They're pretty much free. Where is black has this rook back here, king is right here. But black has a bunch of pieces over here to aid these pawns. So it seems a little more problematic for white to get his point across. h5, a7. This move is pretty much forced here. And now again, during the game, and no lies here. During the game, the first move I looked at was this one. It's just simply d8 queen. Bishop d8. And then rook b8, again just picking up a piece here. This is forced, and then rook d8 check. King e5, and I think it's even now at this point. The king is not in any real danger in this here due to the lack of material, and but I don't think white can win. And matter of fact, I think white is the one that can lose because of the advanced nature of these pawns. That wasn't chosen during the game. b4, again, natural move because, playing on general principles. Let me see. Yeah, playing on these general principles of just pushing the pawns. Past pawns must be pushed. right? So again, another idea to keep in mind is we have to be careful of those old chess sayings, because sometimes just following them blindly will get us in trouble. Of course, I'm not saying Vladimir did that here. I mean, the position is a mess. It's complicated. Um, B4 definitely a natural instinctive move. After all, you figure, hey, I'll just move the bishop out of the way and then just keep running those pawns up the board. After all, who's gonna stop four passers? And again, you gotta. I mean, just aesthetically, like White's position here, because you figure you just get this guy out the way, and then these guys are gonna just come running forward. You already got this guy here. It's like, what the heck, you know? What gives? Caruana did again push his pawns. Well, I mean, what are you gonna do? You have to create some kind of counter action here. C4, uh, again, another natural move by Kramnik. Again, this has to be considered here. The idea is real simple. If Rook takes D8, then you just play Rook B8. So that brings us back to this line again. And then here you got Rook D7. And let's say after King E5, Bishop C6. What else you gonna do? Rook takes. Okay, and that looks close to winning to me for Kramnik. He plays C4, H3, C5 check. Um, Again, it's probably time to try to attack the criminal here, right? You gotta stop the pass pawns. It's probably time to get somebody, a detective assigned to that case. Play C4 check. Excuse me, C5 check. What's more natural? Again, that's the shame about this game is some of the moves are so natural you can't really knock Kramnik for playing them. Right? Gotta be winning at this point, right? After Rook B8, simply just Rook takes A7. Kramnik plays Rook G8. He figures, hey, I'm gonna win this Rook. Bishop F6. There's the Queen. Bishop takes D8, and now Rook takes G4 because this guy is pinned. Right? So you got that, and you have these two passed pawns here, and you're up the exchange, and you're feeling great. Bishop comes to F6. Rook G6. Now Rook B7. So you got this little problem here because after you move the bishop, there's a check against this pawn on B4. Again, remember what I said about blockading past pawns. Notice how these pawns have just kind of been hanging out, right? They don't look too dangerous. But again, they're like past pawns are like criminals. You gotta lock them up. You gotta arrest them because why they don't seem dangerous, 5 or 10 moves down the road, they'll be the reason why you have to resign the position. Rook takes B4 check. King to A2. Knight C2. Of course, attacking the rook here. And what's scary too about this position from the white perspective is the coordination that black's pieces are assuming. The bishop here, knight here, rook here. Kramnik has to be very careful of possible mating net. Rook to C1. Knight D4 by Fabiano, attacking the bishop. And now Kramnik plays bishop to D3. Another idea here is bishop G4. attacking this guy. Idea being, if h2, you play rook e1 check, driving the king away from the protection of this bishop here on f6. Notice that the light square bishop being on this diagonal keeps the white king, excuse me, keeps the black king from going to f5. So all Kramnik can, excuse me, all Caruana could do at that point is play a move like rook a4, king b2, rook b4, king c3, rook b3 check, king c4, and notice how the rook being on this third rank protects that. So rook a3, rook e1 check, rook e3, and rook h1, rook a3, and of course this pawn will then fall. So of course you don't expect Kramnik to see all of that, but the idea though of bishop g4 coming here and cutting off um, this diagonal is very important. Attacking this pawn at the same time, stopping the king's access to f5, and also with the threat of playing rook e1 check, driving the black king away from the defense of f6. So that was a very important move. Notice, however, you had the same scenario here. Kramnik blocks the retreat of the king to f5 and is threatening the same thing. However, there's no threat against this pawn. So he could have gotten more out of that move by playing bishop g4 than he got playing bishop to d3. There's the same kind of scenario. Rook a4 check, king to b1. And of course, it's natural to want to stay off this diagonal. King b2 may have been just a tad better. And this is why, because if the king is on b2, then the knight can't come in like that to b3, because the king would just capture. So a little error by Kramnik. Kramnik plays rook e1 check, king d5, and now you have difficulties here with the rook coming here and with this rook here. Okay, so now Kramnik's gotten what he's wanted, but now he can't really execute because of tactical reasons. Like I said, the coordination of black's pieces is brilliant here, and this is what really saves the game for Fabiano Caruana. If white's king was on b2, this setup can never happen, and either white is gonna lose black is gonna lose material somehow, or the game would just definitely be drawn. So now king c2 is played, knight d4 check, king b1, and this is an unfortunate blunder here by Kramnik. King c1, knight b3. Maybe that draws, maybe, by repetition. If he just does king c1, knight b3 check, king c2, knight d4. I mean, black is not compelled to draw here. I mean, he could still try to push these. So he would have to, after repetition, do a move like that. Bishop e5 to keep things going. Say rook h6 now, and h2. Idea behind that is if rook takes, knight f3, have this fork going on. But again, you're just merely giving back the exchange. Plus white can play this nice slick move right here. Rook takes e5, knight takes, and then rook e5, exploiting the position right here. Knight d3, king d2. Sorry about that blunder right there. I meant to play rook h5. There we go. And now king d4, bishop c2. So black is better in this position. Of course, he has this advanced pawn, but mainly due to the coordination of his pieces, but this king in the center is a monster. Okay, so in the game, Kramnik went back to B1. Knight F3 by Caruana. Rook D1. Rook A1 check. King C2. And at this point, that's just all she wrote. The idea here is if king takes D1, then just simply H2. And of course, if rook H6, this bishop that was being harassed becomes the hero. After bishop H4, cutting off the action of this rook on the H file, and this guy is free. Therefore, bishop H6, rook D2 check. And again, coordination of Caruana's pieces. King B1. And the last of the 4 pawns is gobbled up. And Kramnik was probably just playing on adrenaline at this point. And after F2, Vladimir resigned. So we had this big turnaround. I remember during the game, some people, I was reading a lot of comments on the various sites, like Chess24 and stuff like that. And people were crowning Kramnik as the next challenger to Magnus Carlsen. And I remember thinking, calm down. First of all, we have a whole bunch of rounds left in the tournament. Kramnik could simply, lose 2 games in a row. I thought he was gonna pull this out too, because after Fabiano missed his chance and all that time pressure, sometimes we like to it's like when we look at the stars, right? We can't just look at the stars as separate entities. We have to look at them as, having some type of meaning. We look in and say, oh, that's the Big Dipper, or that's Orion, or whatever. We make shapes out of things, right? That's what we do. So it's kind of like we like to, find, connections where there might not be any. So for instance, with Kramnik, having this bad position against Fabiano, and all of a sudden it turns around and it looks like he's gonna win. Then everybody said, "Oh, it's his destiny. He's going back to the world championship. It's his time." People jump, to conclusions so quickly. And I remember thinking in my mind, just wait a minute. He's an older player, and what I've seen through watching a lot of chess through the years is older players, although they can, of course, still play the game at a high level. When they're in these like long pressure-filled tournaments, usually they can start off very strongly, and then they'll fade at the end because they're subject to being more fatigued than the younger players. So that's how I felt about Kramnik. That Kramnik was gonna come and start off very strong, of course, being motivated and things like that, and then toward the later rounds, he's gonna make some old man moves, quote unquote, some blunder, just from fatigue. And I still stand by that prediction. Now, this was a terrible loss. Now, what's interesting about it is that he probably should have lost anyway, but then he equalized and then was better and then lost. So it would have been bad for both players, Fabiano and Kramnik, if they lost the game. But with the hard fight, maybe a draw would have been the best result, But yeah, their loss is gonna sting, and so again, keep your seatbelts fastened, and don't just because somebody has a good game, don't jump on the bandwagon that quick. So with so far and of course we've seen Levon Aronian bounce back today after crushing defeat, a couple of days ago. So it's not over. So we still got a lot of chess to go. So with that, I'm going to sign out. Hope you liked that video. Please like, subscribe, check my links below, and I will see you on the next video.